So this is Straight Science, and tonight is 14 April. And I'm going to give an introduction for Admiral Bell because we are so excited to have him. I first met him at a Alaska Eskimo Whaling Commission meeting in Barrow. He's not the kind of Coast Guard commander that stays in Juneau. He goes to those meetings. He travels around. He's been very active. And so I was reading his biography, and I had to ask him. In 1984, he was going to school in Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff, Arizona, which is in the desert. And if you read, by 1985, he's done with college, and he goes to the recruiting center. So if anybody wants to know, if you are a recruit and just walk in New Jersey, and the next thing, fast forward a couple of decades, you're the commanding officer for all of Alaska. It's a great, in case we have any community members that have kids that are wondering, you know, what does it mean when you recruit? We're looking at it and going to hear about it tonight. So after recruiting, went to officer school and has had command. He's been at sea for over 12 years, floating around out there on command of several vessels, including the Monroe and what's the other one from Kodiak?
Alex Haley.
The Bulldog of the Bering. Alex Haley, a vessel we all know and love and know. He is, when we say he's the command of the Coast Guard for District 17, that means he is in charge of all of Alaska, including, I didn't know, the North Pacific as well, Gulf of Alaska, North Pacific, the Bering Sea, the Bering Strait region, including all our transboundary issues up here. And he is responsible for all that goes on in the Chukchi Sea and the Beaufort Sea as well. So this is a gentleman who is a maritime leader and a leader for the state, for all of us here in Alaska. With that, tonight's presentation is going to be about, it says protecting the seas, but I think you're going to get a little bit more into the Northern Bering Sea as some of our issues ongoing today as we're moving into, like we said in the promo, the uncharted future ahead. So with that, this is a time for you to speak, not me, and we will hand it over to you, Admiral Bell. Thank you so much for joining us all here in the Bering Strait region.
Well, thanks, Gay. Good evening all. And I really do appreciate the invite and the outreach. I'm so excited to be talking to you this evening here from Juneau. I think everybody has been working through this pandemic issue for the last year plus now. And if you look at the silver lining behind that, we've all gotten really good at being able to stay connected, whether that's via phone, whether that's on Zoom.
Sorry, this is Marina calling in from Gamble.
Okay, thanks, Marina. Welcome.
From Gamble.
Thanks, Marina. We've got you down and we're just starting, so we're glad you made it just in time. Thank you so much. Sorry, sir.
No, that's no worries. So please, as folks come on board, introduce yourself. I'll try to talk for a few minutes, and I've got 2 quick slides. I'll try to talk through those as well, but more importantly, I'll try to open it up for some questions and answers, because I mean, I certainly could talk all by myself, but I'd rather talk about what you're interested in. So again, I'd ask you to kind of facilitate those as we get to that time or that part of the presentation. So I've been up in Alaska now for this tour for 3 years, and I'm coming up on the twilight of my tour. I'm going to retire next Friday officially after 36 years in the Coast Guard. As Gay said, 12 plus of that at sea, most of which was spent in the North Pacific or the Bering Sea. And this is my 3rd tour in Alaska. I've done 2 tours out in Kodiak previously, and now this one in Juneau. And part of my efforts for the last 3 years has been to get out and about. The state is too large, too expansive, and too, I don't want to say complicated, but incredibly diverse, and you can't do it from the office. And so I've been to a number of the communities. I'm regretting that I've not been able to get out to St. Lawrence or St. Matthew Islands to visit those coastal communities, although we've had a couple of ships go by. Difficult to get in, especially this time of the year, but I've got plans for ships to come sailing close by this summer, and I'll make sure we get some advance notification for those visits to not complicate the subsistence hunting or fishing that we have going on, but more importantly, just to give you a heads up that we're going to be in your AOR. So if you have a tendency to be able to give us a shout or let us know what you're seeing, especially things out of the ordinary or out of the norms. We're going to be all ears for that. And I could talk about things that we could ask you to give us a call on, and other things that if it's concerning to you, then give us a call and we'll take a look at it and add it to our list of things to inquire on. So District 17, for the past year, we've kind of hunkered down and limited some of that contact, especially with the off-road communities and the coastal communities, especially in Western and Northern Alaska. We've done some outreach and some engagement, but that's been difficult to do, in an environment where we're trying to keep all our communities and all of our people safe, especially under the COVID protocols that we've been working on. But this is one method here to get out and about. And I will say you'll likely see some coasties in person this coming summer. We're going to look to try to reinvigorate some of that outreach and engagement that we work so hard on. And you'll see Rob Edwardson's here on the phone. He helps coordinate some of that engagement and that outreach efforts that we have here from the Juneau office, but most of which will be prevention and enforcement officers coming from sector anchorage and many of the ships that'll be plying the Bering Sea and the Bering Straits. So we'll just talk about enforcement actions, or what the Coast Guard actions done in the water environment just for the past year. So we continue all our water enforcement actions, throughout Alaska. So here in Southeast, across the Gulf of Alaska, out the Aleutian chain, and concentrated in the Bering Sea. Some actions in the Bering Straits, as you saw, Polar Star was up here the middle of this winter, and then we've had some deployable specialized forces that have come from shoreside units in Bethel and further north up through Kotzebue, and we even had a team up in Utqiagvik latter part of the summer, and we're going to continue to try to do that, mostly outreach and education for our part, because what we're learning is there are folks that have been living, breathing, existing in these communities for thousands of years, and we have a lot to learn. And so the best that we can do to learn more is to just get out and about and ask our own questions, and not only educate folks on what we do, but educate ourselves on the changes that we're all seeing and that we're all witnessing. So we've created some of our own mitigation strategies to work around COVID and keep the fishermen out on the water safe, but also keep our own crews safe. And but we still try to stay focused on those management strategies, those enforcement strategies that help keep not only the fishing industry safe, but also we see that that keeps those fishing stocks healthy. The number of boardings that we've done this past year, I would say maybe the violations are up just a tick, and mostly those were I'll call them safety violations. So missing an inspection on a life raft, or didn't have the exposure chutes recently inspected, or missing some light or sound producing devices. So that's been mostly the violations that we've seen. There's been a couple of fishing violations that we work with closely with putting case packages together for NOAA enforcement. I mean, even just recently, I think it was just this past weekend, we had a great enforcement effort with some NOAA enforcement agents, and the cutter Stratton, who's out on patrol right now, had been watching some suspicious activities on likely two IFQ vessels that were out along the Aleutian chain. And so coordination between our two agencies, we're able to get a boarding, putting the case packet together, and we'll see where that goes with NOAA. It's a great cooperative effort, not only with NOAA, but the other state agencies as well when we're out and about, because as we all know, that there's no one agency or entity here in the state that can get all the job done by themselves. So we always have to partner and talk to each other to make the most use of the scarce resources and the assets that we have. So like last summer, again, this coming summer, we've got some deployable teams, small boats that they work from the beach and work out into those heavier, busier areas. And so we've been in places like Bristol Bay. We'll expect to be back there. We're looking to try to get into Sitka and Homer this coming summer, and as well up through Nome and Kotzebue. How long the teams will be there is still yet to be decided. It's still a little early in the season. But as we start to deploy those teams, we'll try to communicate well in advance, so you know that they're coming, know what the expectations are and what they're going to be doing, and what they'll be enforcing. we can talk about the concerns on where the current fishing fleet is and the migration of that fish fleet as I'll call it, as they chase the migration of the fish stocks, west and north in the Bering. Activity on the maritime boundary line continues to be complex we've watched it for decades. I mean, the Russians continue to fish there. We continue to fish on our side of the line for the most part. And I'll say that for the most part, we stay on our side of the line and they stay on their side of the line from a fishing perspective. And I'm sure we could talk about Q&A here about the interactions that we had with Russia this past summer with their naval exercise and the challenge that we had with them chasing off a couple of the U.S. fishermen who are legally fishing in the USCG. And I can talk to that a little bit later if there's some Q&A on that. But this, again, all of this requires some communications, but an understanding of what's out there and what we're doing. So I'm going to share a quick 2 slides for you, for those that are on the call, and I'll try to talk through these for everyone. So this first slide is AIS and VIMS traffic. So this is a briefing slide that's put together every day, and I formally talk through this slide Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays just for a routine briefing slide. And so the picture that I'm looking at here is all of the movement in the Bering Sea, across the Aleutian Islands, and in the North Pacific. And so you can easily see most of the merchant traffic coming from Asia, going to western coast of the United States and Canada. You see that Great Circle route coming, up around the end of the Aleutian chain and then through Unimak Pass and down to the south, and we track them. And then you see the distribution of the fishing fleet, which for this one is I'll call it the proverbial green dots on the sheet here. And those are concentrated over in the Gulf of Alaska, Bristol Bay, in and around the Pribilofs, and then work their way all the way up to the northwest next to the NBL. And just on the other side of the NBL, you can see a couple of the Russian fishermen that are up there working those factory trawlers on the western side of the NBL, typically chasing that pollock fleet that's up there. And so when we...
Admiral Bell,
go ahead,
I'm
Dave.
sorry, I'm just ignorant of some of your acronyms personally.
Sorry.
MBL, and also some of the audience may be, what is the AIS? That's the automated information.
Yep. So AIS and VMS. So automatic information system and the vessel monitoring system. So if folks are participating in a fisheries, then they're required to use that AIS. Most of the traffic, merchant traffic going to east to west, will have issued a VMS, a vessel monitoring service. So we can kind of sort of track them. Their company can track them if they are connected to alternative planning criteria for oil prevention and that sort of thing, that they'll be monitored as well. So that's how we see that information displayed, and it's unclassed. Anybody can look at it. You can go look at it on a number of different websites and see that. And so when we refer to the MBL, the maritime boundary line, that's that line that runs from the southwest off the end of the Aleutian chain up to the northeast, up through the Bering Straits. And so maritime boundary line divides Russia waters from U.S. waters. And then there's a small picture there for the the proverbial donut hole, or the central Bering Sea, that's outside of any country's exclusive economic zone or EEZ, true international waters in that particular case. So great, thanks, Gay, and please stop me if I get too hung up on the acronyms. I try not to do that too often. So we see this picture day to day, and I usually get a brief as to how many vessels are out and operating, what fisheries they're participating in, where they happen to congregate, and then where our particular Coast Guard assets are allocated or planned to go for that particular day. And so for this slide, not very old, as you can see, the ice edge is there just north of St. Matthews, and pretty consistent through the winter. We'll have 30 or 40 vessels that we'll track that are engaged in fishing in the Gulf of Alaska. And then, I think this week today's brief was 88 vessels that are fishing, various endorsements in the Bering Sea, mostly concentrated from Slime Bank up along the 100-fathom curve, working up to the northwest. Track those, and we'll see, in the height of the season when fish are running and crab are running, we could have as many as 150. I've seen 177. I think this year was the high number of vessels out trying to catch. And so our law enforcement actions and our prevention actions will be concentrated wherever that largest fleet happens to be. And I say we've had some success because we take our assets, which we call them highly deployable, expeditionary nature. We take them to where the greatest threat is. So mostly related to search and rescue. So whereas, where could the most catastrophic case happen? Crab season's pretty challenging, pretty dicey time of the year. So we'll try to stay focused near that particular fleet. But at the same time, there's other fleets that aren't visited as often just because of that tyranny of distance. So along the Aleutian chain are a number of vessels that we don't get to see as regularly as we'd like to. And further up north, out to the west, that's a long way away from our home operating stations. I'll call it Dutch Harbor and Kodiak. But with new cutters coming online, so we have the national security cutter, our cutter Wimsel. So the Coast Guard cutter Stratton is up there on patrol now. That's a brand new asset to the Coast Guard inventory. They're incredibly capable, have much longer staying power, can get through some of the more rougher seas, and have some inherent capabilities on board that we can communicate with them much more easily. They can develop some maritime domain awareness much more efficiently than the cutters that were built, in the 70s or 60s, if you go back all the way to, Storis and Acushnet days. Those national security cutters are in the Bering Sea today, and we'll continue that travel and those operations until the offshore patrol cutters, the OPCs, that's the next Coast Guard acquisition line comes online. We should see the next 4 hulls created over the next 4 years. So by 2024, 2025, we should start seeing 2 new offshore patrol cutters, or OPCs, home ported in Kodiak, Alaska, primarily patrolling the North Pacific, Bering Sea, and Bering Straits to the out years. And then, of course, everybody, I hope, is seeing the advertisement that the Coast Guard has got the long lead items and approval to build the first polar security cutter. That's the first icebreaker replacement in 40 years since Healy was built. And I would expect that hull to be delivered to the Coast Guard in 24, maybe 2025, a year of break-ins and ice trials and crew training. And then they should be fully operational by 2026, when the second hull should be already starting to be built. And, there's some discussion as to how big that next generation of icebreaker fleet should be. The Coast Guard answer right now is we're going to get 6. There's some language out there that talks about maybe it needs to be 9 or more. And of course, that gets into a heavy competition with what Russia has, with what Canada has, and what China is threatening to do. And so more is better from my perspective, but that's always also too limited by resources. And as we know, the shrinking dollar, especially with where the economy's at right now, I'm going to be happy with 6. Would probably be happier with more than that. And we'll see what acquisitions does down the road. So anyway, back to the picture. This is what I see. And then we always ask the question, well, where do we think that the greatest threat's going to come from? We start with search and rescue, and then from an enforcement perspective, who do we think that we could get aboard to ensure, vessel safety and fishing operations, fisheries management to the best of its ability. And we work with our the partners from NOAA and ADF&G and others that talk about how best to deploy those limited assets that we have. And just to put this in perspective, I mean, everybody understands this distance from Bristol Bay out to the end of the Aleutian chain up to the Bering Straits. I have a single Coast Guard cutter underway today, and they're just off of Dutch Harbor. So to say that, oh, I'll just get out to St. Paul or get out to St. George, okay, that's a day and a half steam. And if we start talking St. Matthews or points north, that's 3 to 5 days, weather permitting. And of course, with none of those ships being ice hardened, I couldn't get any further north of St. Matthews than what the ice limits or the ice edge is showing right now. So that's complicating for us. I mean, obviously, I've got great support out of Air Station Kodiak with our C-130Js, incredibly capable 4-engine turboprop aircraft, can fly for 8 to 12 hours in the Bering Sea and provide some great, I'll call it situational awareness, maritime domain awareness, can provide search and rescue. They can take pictures. They monitor the maritime boundary line, so kind of keep tabs on where the Russian fleet is fishing or not fishing, as the case has been the last couple of weeks. They seem to all have migrated much closer to shore than fishing up next to the NBL. I think they only had 2 ships up next to the maritime boundary line during this morning's brief. But great support out of Air Station Kodiak, plus the H-60 fleet that they have, the large rotary wing helicopter, and then the smaller helicopters H65 that we embark on the back of the cutters, which Cutter Stratton has one of those embarked today. And so with that, I'll go to my next slide. And my next slide takes a focus a little bit further north, so north of St. Matthews Island up towards St. Lawrence, and just talks about my opinion, the migration of the fishing activity that's moved basically from northwest of St. Paul up to the northeast, and that's it's been a change. Most of that, I think most of you all realize that's the freezer longline fleet. There's, I think, 7 to 14 catcher processors. Each of those, from my perspective, a search and rescue perspective, had 20 to 40 people on board. So we try to pay attention to that. But at the same time, they're chasing the fish stocks that used to be west and south of St. Matthews. And, that just a few years ago, probably 2015 is where that longliner fleet was pretty well focused. And then all the way to the north. Yep.
Admiral, this is Gay. I'm just going to, for the people on the phone, this is the second slide he has, and it has a map. Now we show the Bering Strait region, and it has a cluster. It goes from about Bristol Bay on up to just a little north of Wales and Cape Dejnev, and it does have St. Lawrence Island in it, and it also shows where the major commercial fishing fleet for, is this all Pacific cod that you're showing?
Yeah, yes.
And it shows this that they've been down sort of northwest of St. Paul normally, and that the main aggregation seems to be moving north, but there's a green circle between Diomede, Port Clarence, and Savunga, and I think he's talking about that in particular, that area.
Yeah, so you're so absolutely right, Gay. So thanks, help for those that haven't seen the slide. And this particular slide, I'll make sure I can get this slide to you, Gay, and we could push that out so folks understand what we're seeing and what we're looking at, and just this migration of the fleet. And we had Cutter Monroe that was up and steamed up through the Bering Straits, actually sailed with the Russian border guard vessels that were up there and tried to provide some Coast Guard presence, late in the season this past year. I've got Coast Guard Cutter Midget will be up here later this summer that I plan to try to push up as far north as I can. I'll call it chase the ice as it recedes north this summer, but I'll try to get them up into this region, up through the Diomedes, hopefully to hold the Russians at bay, and get further north into the Chukchi, and if they could, all the way over to Beaufort, but that's rather difficult for a non-ice hardened ship that early in the season. But so we're watching these catcher processors that now operate routinely up there, and to me, the only reason they're staying is because they're catching fish, and so they're able to make money in turn, keep it in the black, and so they're going to continue to do that. Where they're processing those fish is going to continue to watch with interest, as they're fisher processors, they can keep it on board for a while, but if they're able to offload that product somewhere other than Dutch Harbor, then that makes them even more aggressive at being able to fish there, so they don't lose all that transit time to get all the way back down south. And we're going to continue to watch that from a unique Coast Guard perspective. But at the same time, this is from a helicopter perspective, we're 800 miles from Kodiak. And so that's 2.5 hours with a C-130. It's going to take me 2 days to get a cutter up there. It'll take 2 days to get one of our rotary wing helicopters, the large helicopters, out of Kodiak up there. So if something were to happen on one of those longliners, the Coast Guard's in a rough spot if I don't have a local asset or a patrolling asset that would be there. And during the summer, when we have the 2 helicopters, forward deployed to Kotzebue, which we plan to do again this coming summer, it's a much shorter run, but that's not always the case, especially as we observed this last summer or this last fall, that this fleet was up there working, right up to the ice edge till late November, early December, and our folks in Kotzebue stood down 3 months before that. So that's a challenge. And what you see on the chart just north of where that concentration of fishermen is, there's a red line on the particular chart here. That's just to remind me to say, folks, that when we start talking about U.S. fishermen, they're prohibited from going north of that line to fish. I think it goes back to a 2009 legislation from us that prevents them from going further north in that line to fish. And so that's why you see them concentrated just south of that line. Now that's for the US fishermen. Those same rules don't apply for the Russians on the other side of the line. They've got their own management practices and their own management rules. And I actually believe they'll have 2 processors up in the Chukchi this coming spring, fishing basically north of the straits on their side of the line. That's going to require some interest from our part. We're going to try to monitor that. When Coast Guard Cutter Healy, our medium icebreaker, comes up this summer, I'm going to ask them to try to get over next to that fleet to query them, see what they're doing, try to take some pictures of their activity on hopefully the very western side of that line. Is again, I don't think we have a lot of good science data as to what those fish stocks are and where they came from and how prevalent they are. The Russians think that it's sustainable. I think that jury's still out, or that verdict's still out. I think we're going to need a little bit more science on what that fish stocks are and are they sustainable and where are they coming from. So that's kind of this picture. It just gives me some added concerns back toward, most of the Coast Guard activity in the past has been Slime Bank just north of the Alaska main line outside of western, Bristol Bay and up towards St. Paul, St. George, and concentrated with that fishing fleet, that crab fleet. And now we're being stretched all the way to the NBL and then all the way to the northeast. And so that causes me some concern because I don't have enough resources to cover down on that. And so I'm asking the Commandant when he's out here next week to take a look at that. I've asked my boss, Vice Admiral Fagan, who's the Pacific Area Commander, to try to generate some more resources to help cover down on those needs across the expanse of the Bering Sea and Bering Straits AOR. And of course, anytime I get a chance to bend the ear for Senator Murkowski or Senator Sullivan or Congressman Young, they're all ears to talk about what are those resources needed to support our communities across Alaska. And it's rumored that they're actually going to be out here at the end of next week. So I'm looking forward to having a personal conversation with Senators Murkowski and Sullivan specifically about the requirements for the Coast Guard going forward. And so that's excuse me, that's all I had on my actual slides presented there. And I'm certain I could talk all through this, but I figured we'd give a few minutes to do a couple of questions and answers and what's on your mind. And me, the sky's the limit. If I don't know, I'll take a note and I'll go back and find the expert and get you an answer back. But otherwise, I'll try to give you my best guess, or at least my perspective from where I sit here in Juneau. So with that, Gay, I'll try to turn it over to you and we'll see what Q&A we can generate.
Sure. Well, thank you so much. That was a lot of information, and what a rare opportunity for us on this call with to have the ability to ask questions right up. So I know I have questions, but let's let if there's the callers really get the priority because it's a tenuous phone call anyway from St. Lawrence Island. And I can see we've got one caller. Go ahead.
Good evening, Gay.
Hi, Ben.
Good evening, Gay.
Good evening. Oh, good evening. I think that's not Ben. Good evening. Do you have a question for Admiral Bell?
Absolutely. Coast Guard is what we call the presence of the Coast Guard on St. Lawrence Island. I don't know if Mr. Admiral Bell, you remember me from 2 years ago at the Alaska Eskimo Whaling Commission's meeting in Anchorage, and I approached you about the shipping lane and the new updated shipping lane course that you had mentioned of possibly having representatives coming up to the island to get comments about what you are going to do with the shipping lane. Would you be inclined to tell us if there has been any progress made, or if you have, just like everybody else, have been hunkering down and kind of keeping everything at bay until the ability to move freely physically is able to be done. I had mentioned that if you would consider moving the shipping lane from St. Lawrence Island to the east side of the island to 50 miles because of the pristine area of marine mammal migratory routes that happen year-round around St. Lawrence Island. I will give you a chance to respond to that, and then I have an entanglement issue I wanted you to hear me out on also.
Yeah, so great. So thanks for the question. And so yes, we were, I'll call it, hunkered down for a little bit this year because of COVID. So we kept our folks in the office because we couldn't get them out safely to, especially some of the smaller communities, especially out to the islands. But we're planning to get back out there this summer. So the teams working for the prevention department here in Juneau are planning to come back this summer. We've done some outreach and planning efforts to where they're going to try to go, and so we're gonna do that. Whether they can make that come about early in the season, it's probably going to be a little difficult, but I'm expecting to the latter part of the summer is for them to be able to get out and have some in-person discussion. You know, when we start talking about, you know, adjustments to migratory patterns or adjustments to traffic lanes that were agreed to by the Russians already, agreements to areas to be avoided, those ATBAs, and how that influences the next generation of Arctic waterways schemes from, you know, what goes from basically Bering Straits and north across the top of the state. All that's got to be done in person because it's just too difficult to do in a virtual environment. And as we already learn on this, you know, most of the time, some of that connectivity to those remote villages becomes more problematic than useful. And so we need to be able to do that in person. And my personal feeling is we build up a much better trust and rapport by having the folks that are actually going to be drafting up the rule, drafting up the proposed proposals to be doing that in person and have a little bit of continuity from year to year as they continue to work that. So I think that should answer your question up front. Is yes, we're coming, and hold me to giving you some advance notification as to when they'll be there to have those discussions.
And John,
Thank you very much for your comment. Yes, this is John Wally, by the way, and I am the commissioner for Savunga with the Alaska Eskimo Whaling Commission. And we have articulated these comments and concerns to Murkowski and Sullivan as well. And they have been proactively been listening to the concern about the shipping lane area east of St. Lawrence Island. The other issue I wanted to discuss with you is that I don't know if you knew the presence of the longliner industry 2 years ago north of St. Lawrence Island as late as the middle part of November. And what we found out at that time from I think Gay or Coeric or somebody was that it was a longliner fishing for cod north of St. Lawrence Island just before the winter set in late November. And at that time, you know, the bowhead whale and the marine mammals will be migrating south on the Bering Strait corridor. And that is concern for people on the island because that will be having negative effects on the migration because of the noise level of vessels that would probably disrupt the migratory path of the bowhead whale stock and some other marine mammal resources. Not only that, it's a dangerous time of the year when the North Pacific, which is the Bering Sea, gets very, very windy and dangerous. And there was some discussion of who these guys were and what they were doing there. We understand from what we have been told is that Uncle Ted many years ago put it as part of the Magnuson Act to protect the longliner industry's presence in the Bering Sea. And we had requested some key personnel to take a good look at the Magnuson Act about how you can change it so that the protection of the bowhead quail stock and other species, as well as our livelihoods as being bowhead quail harvesting communities, is protected. And the last thing is entanglement. You know, the bowhead whale is an ice whale, and if you see the ice pack, it's south around St. Matthew Island, and we have harvested bowheads as well as those up north of us. They have seen scarring of bowhead whales that had entanglement issues, and I think that they need to observe this and monitor this because the Marine Mammal Protection Act protects these endangered species, and so they need to probably look at what the crabbing industry is doing in the winter time, and then the longliners or whoever is down there south of us doing their activities. So these are very key points of issues that impact our people as well as the bowhead whale stock. Thank you very much for taking the time to spend some time with us. That is important for us.
Yeah, thanks, John. And your last comment there on entanglement and possible changes to the Magnuson-Stevens Act are important. I was literally on the phone with my NOAA counterparts just last month talking about some potential options and changes that might be available. And I know that Senator Murkowski specifically is very interested in trying to get some language to change, and whether they can change that particular act or not. I'm willing to talk with our NOAA counterparts and engage with her to figure out what's the best way forward that can get not only those coastal communities supported, but also preserve those migratory species that have to go north and south through that very small, narrow channel.
Thank you both for that. John, are you set now? Do you have any other comment?
I will give other people an opportunity to ask or talk about issues.
All right.
At this time, Gay. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. And do any of the other callers first, before you do have some questions in the chat, and also Rick Toman had his hand up for a while, and I think he's been very patient. Any other of the callers, though, because in a moment's notice, you can get disconnected as soon as you leave Nome in any of our communities. Any other callers with a question? I see you, Charlie, as well. All right. So
yes, Gay Sheffield.
Go ahead.
Hi, this is Lucy Apatakian Gamble. I want to thank John Wayi for articulating our concern. That is a big concern for us also here in Gamble. And we recently had a joint meeting, and the marine highway impacting our subsistence way of life is very concerning to us. And one of our elders noted that already the pattern of migration of the whales is changing, or they're redirecting their route because of all the activity and noise that's happening. So I want to thank John for his comment, and those are also the very concerns that we have here in Gamble. My question is, and I've brought this up before, is how are we as a nation, United States working with the other nations to let them be aware of our subsistence way of life and how to protect that. Thank you.
Yeah, so Lucy, that's a really good question. Just a matter of fact, this week, the Arctic Council is meeting, and they have a section on communications, especially talking about native and indigenous concerns and how that's, I'll call it, voiced into those host eight nations as they host that Arctic Council. So that's a topic, an agenda topic at the council. Now I've got Coast Guard reps, or the Coast Guard has reps that are there. Our Commandant gave a senior leader talk yesterday, and there's some other folks from our policy shop that were participating all this week. And so I don't know the context of where their resolution or where they were looking to go, but I'll see if I can pull on that information and be able to share that back with you as to how at least that portion of the conversation was going. And then there are other mechanisms. You know, the Inuit Circumpolar Council has mechanisms to be able to outreach to governing bodies to share some of those concerns. I think for me personally, you know, having conversations, you know, directly from Gamble to the Coast Guard, or from Savunga back to the Coast Guard, to me here in the Juneau office, to Captain Lusk in the Anchorage office, share those comments with me directly, because that's a direct line to the folks at headquarters, to my agency partners with NOAA and others that can help possibly change those. And at the same time, I have direct communications with the Russian border guard, so my counterpart in Kamchatka, as well as the head of the Canadian Coast Guard. So we talk regularly. Now, some of us, we don't have the same authorities and can regulate that, but with that personal communications, that allows us to reach to other commissioners and other ministries inside those governments to be able to get a unified response to that. And especially as we talk about the Bering Straits, that's important for our dealings when I have to deal with Russia and the Russian border guard, or as we get up further north and we have to talk with our Canadian counterparts. So I would say, you know, continue to share that information in venues like this, or direct communications over to the sector Anchorage office, or to me here personally in Juneau. Thanks, Lucy.
Thank you so much. That is very encouraging to hear and to know. We are wondering, we want to voice our concern in a written form, so it's in writing. Who would be the best organization to direct this letter to regarding our concerns?
You can send it directly to me. And if you look on the chat page there, Rob Edwardson is the tribal liaison here for the Coast Guard 17th District, and he's put his email address on there. If you can formulate that letter and get it to him directly, he'll make sure he gets it to me, and I'll guarantee that I'll share it with my other federal partners and my state partners as well.
And Lucy, this is Gay. I know you're on the phone, so you unfortunately can't see that right now, but I'll make sure you get that address for Robert.
Thanks, Gay. Thank you.
So any other?
Okay,
thank you,
very
Lucy.
good. Thank you so much.
You bet. You bet. Any other question from any of the callers? Hard to be a caller on a Zoom call, Zoom thing. All right. With that, I know Rick Toman, you had a question, and Charlie's been waiting patiently with his hand up. So Rick, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. Thank you, Admiral, for taking your time here to be with us tonight. My question perhaps touches on the concerns raised by the St. Lawrence Island communities, but specifically focused on the wintertime industrial traffic that we saw this year in December and January, the big liquid natural gas tankers coming through the Bering Strait. And if you could just touch on kind of the Coast Guard's perspective of your view of that, and what you do in that kind of, at least at this point, still unusual time of year activity. Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks, Rick. So we're seeing that as well. And my personal opinion is that activity is only going to increase. I mean, Russia is working hard to establish, I'll call it normal traffic patterns from their Yamal field, their Yamal production facilities there to the west, and then bringing that product across the top of Russia and down through the Bering Straits to markets in Asia and South. They have gone publicly that says they're going to do more. They're trying to open up a whole nother field as well. And they continue to push the limits on the capability of their ice breaking LNGs and trying to increase that productivity, that throughput. We were, I'll call it, surprised to see them so late in the season. And I would venture a guess that the next one coming through to open up the spring will be here shortly. And I would say next summer it'll be here even earlier as they continue to try to press the limits of those shoulder seasons to establish routine traffic going south. We continue to monitor them. We continue to track them as they're working that international trade going south. I'm also interested in on what type of icebreaker support is required for any of those Northern Sea Route transits. I mean, during the summertime, they don't need any escort for that. The LNG ships are quite capable. And even here into the late fall, they were making that complete transit without an icebreaker escort. More toward the middle of the winter required a heavier icebreaker support. I don't think that you'll see normal transits I'll call it in the heart of the winter, because it requires commitment for those icebreakers that have commitments elsewhere to be able to do that long transit. And I don't believe Russia's ready to make that commitment yet. Of course, they've got more icebreakers in construction right now. So to me, it's only a guess or a matter of time to see that more and more often. I think we're several years away from seeing year-round movement or year-round production of those tankers through the Bering Straits. But I also think too that it's just a matter of time before they make that happen, at least on the LNG side. I mean, there's a larger conversation about trans-Arctic motion, especially for cargo traffic. I think the insurance rates are too high for that because it's too unpredictable. It's not very well mapped and would require escort. So I think that's much further away than what we're seeing with the LNG traffic coming from Yamal. The Bering Straits PARs, that access route that we've already got approved, Russia stays to that. I mean, they stick to that. So we know where they're supposed to be going. We know what actions they're supposed to be taking. We saw a little bit of evidence this past middle of this winter that really wasn't quite true as we watched Polar Star interact with one of those tankers coming from the south that required some interesting interactions with them. And so we're going to continue to have that conversation with my counterparts to ensure that the agreed to maneuvers that they have right now, they stick to those so it becomes predictable. And then as was mentioned earlier from John, if we need to make modifications because of migratory species or known migration routes, then we can talk about what the impacts of that are and how that relates back to their, I'll call it, normalized traffic patterns. Does that kind of answer your question, Rick?
Yes, thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you. And Charlie, just one bit of patience. Somebody had written in that there was one of the callers maybe was trying to get online or get a voice and I missed it. Was there a phone conversation or anyone from the calling group trying to get a question in? All right.
This is Ben in Savannah.
Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, my great concern for the fisheries is we need to create some sort of a emergency buffer zone, because this island is kind of like a quick stop for the migration of the walrus going north and then south. And 50 to 60 miles out from the island are abundance of food for the walrus. And thinking about the fisheries, they're going to be stationary, but they're also going to disturb the bottom where the food abundance is for the walrus. And if we were to create a buffer zone at the max, more of an immediately or emergency, who would we approach an application to?
Yes. So Ben, so challenging question. I would say send it to me and I'll share it with our counterparts. As soon as we start trying to create, emergency zones, especially when they're outside of 12 miles, or these, I call them safety zones or security zones, is what we typically do, and you make them movable. It gets difficult to write that into a rule or into a law. Not saying that it's impossible. We just typically don't do that. It's been brought up a couple of times now, especially as I was looking at bowhead movement, north of Utqiagvik into the east. It's predictable, but it's not necessarily the same distance from shore each time. And so it'd be great to have a movable or a migratory type buffer zone or a safety zone. That makes sense to me. It's just difficult to get it in writing and then become enforceable. So I would ask that you take your proposal and send it to me, and I'll try to share it with my peers and with the environmental law folks that we're gonna see if we can get to yes or get to an answer on that, because you're certainly not the first to bring that up. And as we look as these waterways become, I'll call it, more congested, I think that type of approach will become more valuable going forward. Does that help, Ben? And Gay will help get you my phone number and the email address here for the district office, and we'll try to come up with an equitable solution to help you with that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that would be a fastest approach, I guess. Yeah, Gay, if you would receive that email and refer to us over here.
You bet. And I think that also the managers of those marine resources like Walrus, which would be Fish and Wildlife Service, or for Bowhead would be NOAA.
Yep.
Those would also be, and I think it's really great, and maybe that's a really great conversation for all these agencies maybe that have concerns in the region of the Bering Strait, to get together and maybe hammer out some of the concerns or bring them together so they can discuss them. I think that's really great. And I would just add for the Admiral that these liquid natural gas tankers, which kind of caught us by surprise, honestly, coming unescorted in February or January, and then getting escorted out across the Northern Sea Route in February, know that when there is this talk of them coming down in April, that will be coming down through, as has been stated by St. Lawrence Island, the richest part of the Bering Sea, right in the
Yep.
Bering Strait as you go to the west, where the Gulf of Anadyr water is. And they are heavily pregnant right now. So those machines will be coming at 12 knots down through the pupping grounds, animals that are heavily pregnant on top of ice, animals, brand new calves in ice, whales and so forth. So there is some other concerns there. And we all should give Charlie Lean a tribute for being so patient as having his hand up. Go for it, Charlie. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, it's all very interesting. I wanted to thank the Coast Guard and you, Admiral, but over the years, I've been a fisheries biologist for 30 years here, and 3 times I've called the Kodiak office and asked for help in emergencies, talk to your doctors and medical staff while we were doing rescues, and we were responding to something that happened and needed to be addressed right now, but without the expertise of the medical staff coaching me, things would have been even worse. And so even if you can't be there, I think it's really important that you're a resource for those of us that need you, and that's been a big deal. I too am concerned about the situation. As I understand it, the Russians plan to build 70 hulls like those LNG ice-breaking tankers. And if they start running those on a regular rotation, as you described, then the Russian side of the line is going to be awfully crowded. and we're going to see spillover. I don't mean in the form of pollution, but I mean in the form of crowding with Russian fishing boats north of the line and tankers kind of pushing them out of the way. I see this as a very big deal, and I think it's imperative that the Coast Guard could patrol not just south of the Bering Strait, but north of the Bering Strait, especially on those shoulder seasons as the ice advances or retreats. As Gay just said, that's when the big sea mammal migrations occur. So if you had a comment, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, so thanks, Charlie. And so up front, as I kind of mentioned before, you know, if there's an issue that you're seeing on the water or involves the environment or in the water or any of our particular migratory species, you know, give the Coast Guard a call. I mean, it's great to talk about search and rescue. It's great to talk about, you know, getting some medical help out. And we may not have a ship or aircraft that's immediately there, but we have duty flight surgeons that are on call 24/7 and can help work through the mechanics of at least stabilizing and talking about what's the best way to get, whether it's commercial equities there or the Coast Guard there over time. So continue that call. But at the same time, if you see something in the environment, whether it's, you know, climate wise or astrological wise, we're all interested. I mean, we all live and work here in the state and want to learn more about it. So as you see those, call us, because that just helps build our knowledge base that makes us, you know, a little bit more informed when we actually do have to make some of those decisions. So call away, and Kodiak is great when you need to reach and talk to the duty flight surgeon. And I'm actually, as I'm thinking about it now, I'll get my command center to put together the best 4 or 5 numbers to call, and I'll share those with Gay, and she could send it out to everybody. But I have watch standers 24/7 that stand in the command center in Anchorage, Juneau offices, and they can be reached 24/7, simple as a phone or an Inmarsat or an HF call. And they may not be the exact person to talk to, but they knew who to call and have direct comms with the rest of the Coast Guard and our state and federal interagencies. So I'll get a better phone tree out so you get some better direct access to what that help should be. So that first and foremost. Second, yeah, I think you're right on the development of those LNGs. I think there's only going to be more. I think it's going to be a more congested water space, especially in the summertime when the fishing activity increases and that ice recedes and allows access to some of those non-ice capable ships. That will continue to be problematic. During those times of the years, I'm expecting to have Coast Guard presence. So I'd like to say on the water, but it would be in the air as well to try to help monitor and understand what that environment's going to look like. For the next couple of years, in and around the shoulder seasons or in the middle of the winter, we're at risk. And I say that as bluntly as I can. We have 2 icebreakers, Polar Star and Cutter Healy. Coast Guard Cutter Healy had a major engine casualty this last year. They're fixed now. They will be up here this summer on patrol. It's already been announced they'll be operating, doing their normal science mission this summer, but they're also going to circumnavigate North America. So they're going to be working with Canada and a Canadian icebreaker through the Northwest Passage, do some work on the other side in St. Lawrence, and then work their way back down through the Panama Canal at the end of the summer, early in the late in the fall, as they finish out their summer employment. And then Polar Star is still obligated to do break-ins to McMurdo in Antarctic. So as lucky as it was to have them up here this winter and help patrol that Bering Straits, we haven't had a ship in the Bering Straits in the winter for 20 plus years. So to me, that was a win for us. But at the same time, I don't have another ship that's going to be sailing in the Bering Straits in an ice world unless it's an emergency, likely until the polar security cutters come online in 2024, 2025. I know that's pretty grim, but you know that there is, I call it a light at the end of the tunnel, a light on the horizon with the advent of the polar security cutters coming online. But that's the next generation of icebreakers that the U.S. inventory have. I mean, nobody else has an icebreaker. There's a couple of research breakers, but from a search and rescue standpoint, from a national sovereignty, national security perspective, there's no other game in town yet until those polar security cutters come online. the activity that we're going to see with Russia is going to continue to increase. I think right now the only venue that we have to voice those concerns is through the Arctic Forum. Again, not to be negative, but Russia takes over as chairman of the Arctic Forum this year from Iceland. That's, you know, we'll continue to work with them as best we can, but that's problematic when they're the chairman. They're going to set their own agenda, set their own meeting place. And so we'll see, you know, topics of traffic through, protection of those migratory species, protection of indigenous rights to hunting and fishing grounds, to traditional hunting and fishing grounds is going to be problematic, but we're going to continue to try to force those conversations to the table, certainly from a Coast Guard perspective. And I hear some similar perspectives from my counterparts in Canada and Greenland and Iceland, as we all try to rally around what the requirements are to operate. If you want to do that merchant, that's great. But at the same time, you've got to be, you know, mindful and cognizant of what's already happening in those particular water spaces or in that environment, specifically in the confines of the narrow Bering Straits. I know that's probably a long-winded answer that didn't really give you what you were looking for, Charlie, but does that kind of at least give you an understanding of what we're looking at?
Yes, I understand the situation. I just wanted to, I'm also on the Nome Port Commission. I'm really hoping that the Coast Guard can find a way to use us as a resupply station or something to extend your seasons and turnaround times. So anyway, I had one other thought, and that was there's we have longliners up here, not trawlers. So they're not bottom draggers like some of the expressions of concern were, but those vessels do have horsepower, and they are somewhat they're tougher vessels. So if there were an incident like there was this year with the Russian vessel losing one of its propellers and was adrift, and there's always that possibility we could call on the mariners to fill the gap before the Coast Guard could get here. So,
yeah, and we do that. AMVER is the program that we use. I mean, we call on merchant vessels worldwide to help us work through search and rescue cases and provide mariners assist. And most of them are pretty proactive, that you can call them and they're gonna go help. I mean, it's mariners helping mariners. And so we always have that in our back pocket to try to call. You know, and we've done that in the past, and they're usually pretty responsive, regardless if it's U.S. or Russian. It's coming to the aid of another mariner, and they're usually pretty responsive.
Thanks, Charlie. Admiral, how are you doing? It's 7:30. We have there was a question in the audience, and there's also a question in the chat. Are you hanging in there, or do you?
I'm good. I'm hanging in here. I'm good. I got a slight drink, so I'm healthy. I'm good.
Okay, so I know Dean Stockwell, you had your hand up. Do you have a question for Admiral Bell?
Yes, I do. First, but he kind of answered that with his response to Charlie. First of all, nice talk. Really appreciate you reaching out to the communities. I think this is kind of a rarity for most Alaskans, and we do appreciate it. The concerns about noise of these new vessels coming through the area, definitely important to the communities. We've seen a lot of debris being thrown into the area this year from the increased fishing fleet. I just read a report where the Ever Given Suez incident has put the thought of more traffic coming through the straits. And I know all of this is driven by money. My concerns is if there is a major mishap, are you capable of interacting with the Russians to accommodate that? And that, you know, basically, I think you answered that already, and I do appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, so great question, Dean. And so I have direct communications with my Coast Guard counterpart, the Russian Border Guard, but there's a different ministry that's in charge of their prevention, pollution response organizations, and members from my district staff, specifically Mark Everett, talk with his counterparts in Russia regularly. And we practice communications drills. We practice incident communication or incident management plans. We work through that. Our Deputy for Commandant of Operations just signed out a new cooperative manual between us and Russia, our counterparts for pollution response, as well as search and rescue response. And so we have an ability to coordinate those activities in the Bering Straits. And not to paint a complete rosy picture, but we talk that, we can work that. The resources are far away. I mean, I say we have a great working relationship. We'll be able to work with them and provide that response. But most of the, I'll call it the heavy lift for a large spill or a large accident are a ways, whether it's on the US side or on the Russian side. I mean, we have the ability to get that here. And that's where we go back to the whole big interagency, and we call on some big heavy lift operators, and we can get those materials here, but it's a ways. That's concerning for me. I voiced that to the Alaska delegation on what type of inherent capability do we have. I mean, I just look back, 15 years ago, and hey, do we even have a tug, standing outside of Dutch Harbor that can handle any of that great circle route traffic going from Asia to the West Coast? And we have some there, but that still is a long way away from trying to provide any assistance up north, especially if a vessel's in distress, or worse yet, it becomes a pollution case and now threatens shoreside or other parts of the environment. So that's still a ways away. But we work those contingency plans regularly with our Russian counterparts, and we talk. Now I put that in context. I look at two major incidences that Russia had this year, and to me their response wasn't as, I'll call it, well thought out as it should have been, or at least communicated to us here in the United States. And so we asked some questions on, hey, how best to respond, as a unified command, using that term, or how best to share that communications of not only what they're doing, but what their needs may be. And so we continue to try to improve not only the response posture, but also that communications dialogue that we have with them in both directions. Does that help answer that, Dean?
Yes, it does. And just to give you some perspective, I first sailed on the Cutter Glacier prior to the sea trials for the Polar Star. And so I've been on several SARS missions with your guys. And all I want to say is thank you for your service, and thank your people for the service. They do a great job.
Great. Thanks, Dean. And so maybe I'll keep your name here close hold. And as we get the Polar Security Cutter #1 up here floating in the water, maybe we'll try to get you aboard, and you can continue that long blue line of saying that you've been aboard one of those of all the classes of icebreakers over time.
Well, I can give you a Healy hat that comes from their first mission. So anyways, have a good one.
Thanks, Dean.
Thank you, Dean. All right, and Marty Reedy had a question in the chat, but I think it got answered. Marty, I still see you on there. Do you have any other question? It was regarding heliops, when they're actually going to be operational, but I think you answered that they kind of are, and they're just about to get ready for their summer session. Marty, is that?
That's correct. The question was answered. So thank you, Admiral.
Yeah. So Marty, on that, so they had that catastrophic engine casualty this summer, but huge engineering effort to cut a big huge hole in the side of the ship to get that motor out and get it replaced. But it's all been sealed up. They've been refloated. They're working their, I'll call it, their spring trials, their spring training to get the ship back up, and we'll see them this summer. The Commandant just announced probably 10 days ago this joint effort with Canada this coming summer. And so we're just finally getting the details on what their patrol schedule should look like. And as soon as I get a hard copy of where we expect them to be and what they're going to be doing, I'm going to try to share that with all the stakeholders, including many of the folks that are on this call, just so you're aware of where Healy's going. Most of their initial, I'll call it phase 1, phase 2 efforts will be supporting National Science Foundation research efforts, and that's their typical summer mission. And then they're going to work, north of Utqiagvik and then to the east with through the Northwest Passage with their Canadian counterparts. we hope to get some good information, good work out of them. But I'll be sure to share their patrol schedule and their efforts soon as they have that, we have that public available. Thanks, Marty.
Thank you.
So 2 last questions, and I really do appreciate you staying with us, Admiral. And that is, Carol Gales is asking the bazillion-dollar question that's on the minds of all people in Nome, and that is, will the U.S. Coast Guard be stationed here in Nome once we get our expanded port? I don't know. And don't be afraid to be blunt, because in the Bering Strait region, blunt is okay. We need to just hear what it is.
So it's a great question. So I would tell you, my position is if what's that? There's a Field of Dreams or whatever, the baseball. You build it and they will come. You build it and we'll use it. That's probably the best commitment I could get to you. Stationing something there permanent, probably most likely not going to happen. When the Coast Guard were expeditionary in nature, we take the assets and move them to the highest demand. It sort of independent to where they're home ported. My concerns with Nome, from an operational perspective, is it won't be ice-free 365. And so if I'm going to position an asset there, especially a surface asset, it's got to be able to move, 24/7, 365. And unless it's icebreaker, ice class, and that gets into a whole nother different conversation as to where the polar security cutters are going to be home ported. But if the water's deep enough, we'll use it, and I would say use it regularly, especially for logistics runs, especially if we need to move things further north. I can guarantee you that polar security cutter and Healy, as they continue to do those high latitude missions, it's much easier to stop in Nome than it is to take the extra 3 to 5 days to go all the way down to Dutch Harbor, or worse yet, have to go all the way around and outside to Seward to do any logistics work. But so upfront is, if it's there, we're going to use it. Now, home porting stuff there and making that a permanent basing, that's a little more challenging, a little more difficult decision, just because of the 365 nature of the work for the Coast Guard, and they need to be able to go, I'll call it everywhere and anywhere, throughout the year. I think that's probably the best answer I could give you up front, Gay.
Thank you. Awesome.
Sure.
And then we'll end it with Wes. But first, what were the 2 incidents on the Russian side? Are they related to the wave of debris we saw here?
So no. So the first one was off of Kamchatka. So they had a large plume that came out and killed a large number of fish. Was supposedly, toxic waters. Was that a release, or was that something already in the environment? Really never did get much clarity on that. And then The second one was, I'll call it, a rocket launch that went bad, that was on the north shore, Chohotka, and it was and it created its own mess, independent of the references that I was there before, but the large oil spill that they had in Siberia.
The diesel.
The diesel, so all put it ashore, and that was huge oil spill. But again, no resources to respond, so it leaked for a great deal of time before they brought some expertise in. How much of it actually got to the navigable waterways is debatable, but it still was complicated that they had a major release in a waterway and didn't see a lot of action, at least initially, and even they declined to comment on it or acknowledge that it occurred initially. So those are the 2 specific events that I was talking about.
Thank you. Although a loose rocket, that sounds of interest to us. Last question is, what activity do you see increasing on the U.S. side of the Bering Strait, and what magnitude compared to the Russian side? You mentioned already about there's going to be fishing. We understand that. We haven't heard how last year went, but I'm sure there'll be a report forthcoming. But no surprise that they're going to be fishing north of Diomede and to the Chukchi this coming year. It must have been successful. But on the U.S. side, it looks like Wes is asking, what activities are we preparing for compared to the Russian side?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I would think that the fishing fleet is going to continue to be aggressive to chase the fish stocks where they're going. So to me, that will dictate where that fishing fleet goes. But I don't see that number, the fishing fleet, growing anything. As I say that, at the height of the season, we saw 170, 180 vessels that were operating, from Bristol Bay all the way north. And I see those numbers remaining fairly consistent, especially as where the the price of protein fish stocks are worldwide. I think that's going to continue to. So I don't see any new adventures going that way, or folks trying to get after that. And I still think that the fisheries inside the Bering Sea is probably the best managed in the world, and I think that will continue. So I don't see the number of fishing vessels changing drastically that would cause me some alarm. There's going to be the normal traffic, and I'll call it the industrial traffic when ports start to open back up, mostly delivery of home heating oil and heating fuels, Western Alaska and Northern Alaska. Of course, the mine will open back up there in Red Dog, at Kotzebue, that'll open back up north. So you'll see that normal activity. And then I don't see what's going to happen on the North Slope is big question mark. I certainly don't see, the big mass arrival of what Shell-like activities did a few years ago because of the depressed price of the barrel of oil. But I'm not a futures market kind of guy, but I'm just kind of watching that as we are. And then new administration has put some I'll call curbed that appetite on new exploration in the Arctic. So that's going to be a challenge for the industry, which again, to me, is a leveling of what the traffic was last year. We'll probably see the same this year. Break. That's the traffic. What I think is going to change is the shoulder seasons. So I think you'll see traffic coming and going longer and earlier, or later and earlier into the seasons. That's problematic. I think the storms themselves are probably at the same intensity, but now less predictable, and causing some interesting dynamics to the gyre in the Arctic, which will, whether you call it coastal erosion, whether you call it changes to migratory patterns, to changes to where the actual leading ice edge is, that allows for some subsistence hunting, especially for some of those ice-borne species to do. All of that's going to change. All of those interactions between the environment, with what we're seeing on the water, with what's going on in the water, are going to interact. And I think those are the changes that we're going to need to adjust to. And so that will require industry to make some adjustments, or be ready to make adjustments to that as those local communities voice those concerns, and I'll call it establish those constraints to try to push them outside of the hunting grounds, or try to push them outside those migratory channels. So that's what I think we're going to have to see and adjust to as I'll call it man or industry adjusts to the environment as it continues to be more dynamic, as we go forward. Does that provide you an answer to that question, Gay? That's a great question.
Wes, are you satisfied with that answer? That's the question for you. Yes, he says thank you.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Great question, Wes. Thank you.
And with that, we should probably, we've gone over. Oh, thanks, Wes. Did you want to comment? Nope. I thought he was on for a sec. Thank you. I think we'll end it there, because you've exceeded expectations and your time. For the audience, I would ask you to write in a little love for Admiral Bell or the Coast Guard and the Coast Guard. It is not easy to be a Bering Strait speaker, especially on a beautiful Wednesday night. I don't know what it's like in Juneau, but it is. We expected more people on this, but I think what we had was really unique in that everyone was able to ask their question, and you stuck with us. And so for the Bering Strait region, that is really a rarity that we get to have exposure, and we are really grateful tonight. And also the call-in, I know the call-in people are still on the line. They have not been tossed off yet. If you guys have any comment for Admiral Bell or thank yous, feel free to send them in or say them, because he cannot see anything from you guys. You have no way to text him or chat right this minute. So hopefully this was I know it was for me, very informative. And again, one of the greatest things is Admiral Bell has been our commanding officer for the U.S. Coast Guard for all of us in Alaska since 2018. And he is retiring soon, but he loves us all in Alaska so much, he's going to be moving back to Kodiak from Juneau. So we are not losing this great resource for all of us in the maritime regions. Oh,
So Gay, Yeah, so on that last point, so yes, I'm retiring, what, 36 years? Yeah, so it's been a while. I still haven't figured out what I'm gonna do when I grow up, but I'm moving back to our house in Kodiak, and we're gonna be doing stuff here in the state, and certainly with those communities around the state and with the Arctic. I mean, that's my passion, and I continue to hope to do that. My relief is Rear Admiral Nate Moore. He's the chief engineer for the Coast Guard right now, and he literally reports aboard Monday night. I think he gets off the plane coming from Seattle at 2300 or so. So I will literally pick him up at the airport on Monday, and then formally that relief occurs on Friday the 23rd. He's got a meeting in DC immediately thereafter that he'll take that following week. And then when he returns, we have him on a very aggressive, I'll call it, get to know the state plan very, very quickly. So he'll visit all of the Coast Guard commands. So he'll probably start west in Kodiak, work through Anchorage, and then down here through Southeast, South Central the following weeks. But then we also have him on a pretty aggressive schedule to get out to the communities across the state. So he can kind of put that into perspective and try to introduce himself in person. So as we get that schedule finalized, we'll try to share that with you. But all of the major operating communities that we get to, he's going to try to come visit. And I already have him penciled in to the Alaska Eskimo Whaling Commission meeting. There's a couple other local community meetings. AFN's already asked him to speak as well. So we're going to try to get him out to introduce himself this summer as he steps into that role. So he's got a very steep learning curve, but I think with the aggressive plan that we have, he's going to get out and at least make a formal introduction here over the next couple of months. And then again, that's Rear Admiral Nate Moore, and he'll be here literally on Monday.
Well, thank you. If he comes, it sounds like he's got a busy schedule, but if he does come to Nome, rest assured, we'd love to have a piece of him for a street science like this to reach out to the communities if he's not unable to actually go out to the islands or any of our other outside communities outside of Nome. We'd like to make that available.
Great.
If possible. Again, thank you. You got some good comments in the chat box, and a lot of people thanking you for your service. I thank you for your service too, and we're glad you're staying with Alaska and will be available for this new successor. So thank you so much, and thank you all for participating. Get outside Bering Strait. It's a beautiful night, at least in Nome. Hopefully it's getting better on the island and in Unalakleet as well. So
yeah,
thank
great.
you
Thanks. Really appreciate you setting this up, Gay, and getting everybody community. It's really important to try to stay connected. And again, this is silver lining behind what we're doing. Zoom works, telephones work, but still not the best. But it's at least some bit of connection. So thanks for your leadership in making this happen and keeping the communities connected.
Yeah, I'm sorry Diomede wasn't able to. They were looking forward to this, and for some reason, the phones have been really tough there, but they were looking forward to calling in several of the guys, so I'm sorry they weren't able to join. But thank you, St. Lawrence Island.
Thanks. And if we need to,
St. Lawrence Island, we appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you. So, Gay, if we need to set something up separate for Diomedes just because of the unique environment, and I know phone access there is challenging, but with the Russian border guard activity later this summer and what they've done, where they're continuing to go, I think that's continuing to perseverate as a concern. And so maybe we can set up a separate call for them to try to address some of those specific local concerns. And we can do that at any time, whether that's me or the enforcement shop here, just because they're the experts with it. But I could, if I'm not available, we can get the experts on the phone to at least allow folks to ask some questions to, and at least give you what our Coast Guard position and what our expected actions are this summer.
And I would put St. Lawrence Island in that, and absolutely,
Yep.
I would help organize that, because St. Lawrence Island is also transboundary and right
Yep.
on the border. So they see a lot of action, especially if it's at sea or even in the air. We often see a lot of the response, and of course the war game exercise that happened about 60 miles west of Gamble, including things
Yeah.
like clothing coming ashore and things like that, debris. We see a lot of things out here that may not be, might be of interest to your groups within the Coast Guard.
Yep.
And,
Absolutely.
I think St. Lawrence Island was trying to say something, but one of the callers may have left.
Just a quick honor, salute of honor to outgoing commander, not just keeping the shores of Alaska safe, but for 100% success in search and rescue on this end in the remote area. Our heartfelt thanks to you. Thank you so much for your service throughout these years.
Well, thank you. It's been a privilege and an honor to continue to serve with the Coast Guard. So thanks for that shout out. I really do appreciate it. And I'll pass that on to the folks that really should take all the credit, and that's the folks at the air station and on the cutter. So thanks.
Thank you, Ben. Is that Lucy still on? Any last words? Or John?
Yes, same, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Lucy.
Oh, thank you so much for your service also from Gamble. We appreciate all this information, and very encouraging that our voice is being heard and our concerns are being heard. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much, Lucy. And it's, I find this fascinating is you're trying to talk and you're like, can you hear me? And I'm just nodding, you know, and so I can see myself nod, but you can't when you're dialing in from Gamble. So really appreciate you staying on the call for so long. And I am going to do my best to try to get Coast Guard Cutter Midget or Coast Guard Cutter Healy this summer to swing by and at least be able to, and I'll do the proverbial wave from offshore, but be able to make at least communications with the community. And we'll communicate that well in advance so as to not, you know, disturb any of the fishing or hunting activities that may be going at that time. But we're going to try to commit to getting at least a sail by to let you know that we're still there and interested in what you have to say and show us.